Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl Mini Mindset Reset. I'm your host, Danielle Van. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, a life coach to women, and author, one thing has become abundantly clear. So much of what gets in our way in our daily lives is not only how we think, but what we think, our mindset. Because of that, every other week, I'm taking your requests and questions and handing over quick, easy to use, practical strategies and life tools to help you shift your thinking, create calm, help you understand and express your emotions, harness your inner power, and learn how to navigate your personal story in 15 minutes or less. After all, how else can you get your life together? So let's shift your perspective with the tools and conversations that help you in the throes of change. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast mini mindset reset starts right now. Anxiety in any form can be taxing. We all know that, right? It causes more disruptions than, say, just shaky hands or overwhelming thoughts. Living with anxiety doesn't always mean fixating on certain fears or having this constant state of worry or distress. Sometimes anxiety is less conscious. Marianne from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, hey girl, repping my city that I grew up in, she wrote in and said, I'm starting to think that I have anxiety, but I know people with anxiety and what I'm experiencing isn't necessarily the same. So my question is, are there different types of anxiety and are there different ways anxiety can show up? This is such a great question because, yes, of course, there are multiple types and even classes of anxiety. And in the effort of time, I'm going to leave it right there, right? Because that can be an overwhelming conversation in and of itself. But I am going to say, if you feel like you're experiencing anxiety, it's important to work with your doctor or a qualified mental health professional to root out the causes of your anxiety and determine the best route to help you manage how you are feeling. And just like any medical situation, symptoms of anxiety show up and are different for each person. So knowing, Marianne, that you're saying, I'm feeling like maybe I have anxiety, let's talk about some of the ways that this shows up. And of course, we're not diagnosing here, but I want to help you identify whether or not it's time to maybe make that doctor's appointment, get connected with me or someone else that you trust. So if you have noticed this constant sense of nervousness or unease sort of running in the background noise of your day, or maybe you find yourself restless and tense or unable to relax, you may be experiencing anxiety. And I want to say this, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. Most people experience anxiety at one point or another. And so we just need a little extra help or care. And so again, let's talk about some of those ways that it shows up. If you find yourself struggling to pay attention at work or school or when you're spending time with others, or maybe you feel distracted or detached from your life and your regular activities and interests, you might actually be experiencing anxiety because anxiety can really impact your ability to concentrate, to make plans, to process new information, and you may even have trouble making decisions. A lot of people will say, my gosh, I'm just so scatterbrained. And I will often say, let's look at how you're feeling right now, because maybe it's not that you're scatterbrained. Maybe you are in a state of anxiousness. Anxiety can leave you feeling like you're fuzzy or, maybe clouded, brain fog, again, affecting our focus. And then we can really struggle to make decisions. Now, I'm not talking about that occasional indecisiveness. That's not a major problem that happens to all of us. We have these moments where we're just not keyed in, locked in. But what I'm talking about is where you have this regular basis of struggling to make a decision. You can also feel emotionally overwhelmed because anxiety slowly and subtly wears down your ability to cope with normal everyday life challenges and stressors. So traffic may actually overwhelm you. Maybe you find yourself more irritable or tense or edgy, and all of that starts to spill over. Or when you get upset, you burst into tears and you can't really describe your mood. You're not necessarily angry. This is anxiety. Okay. Anxiety has a way of getting into the worst part of our feelings, and it creates that doom and gloom, that feeling of danger. And sometimes it's really vague. It's not as noticeable. And we get into this pessimism that happens, right? It is where we even become defensive. Instead of looking for hope and optimism, we get into what could be wrong, and we're always looking to create a backup plan. Anxiety can be physical too, right? And we all know that. But we tend to think that it feels like our heart is racing or our hands are shaking, but it could be muscle tension and pain. It could be headaches. It could be grinding your teeth. It can be that chest pain. It could be waking up all night long. It can be feeling like I just don't want to eat. You can even feel dizzy or just overall weakness. If this is happening, you definitely want to go and see about some management programs or ways to help reduce the overall anxious feeling. There's some overlooked symptoms of anxiety too, and let's talk about the mental places that this shows up. It's forgetting words, right? That happens a lot, where you're talking and then all of a sudden you're in your head, you're in your thoughts, and you really struggle to connect to what you're saying and to the conversation that you're having. Again, you have a hard time with decisions, but sticking with decisions. So an idea comes in and you're like, that's great, I'm going to do that. And then a couple hours later, you have already jumped the gun into something else and you're having a hard time. Sometimes that's more about anxiety than it is your motivation and determination. Another overlooked sign of anxiety is constantly seeking reassurance. Now, this is a little different than just needing that outside validation, which of course does kind of have an undertone of anxiety to it. This is a place where you feel like you cannot make a correct decision and you begin to feel that physical rise, or the head is beginning to spiral because you don't want to make the wrong decision. Understand that underneath that is anxiety. Of course, there's even when we act in a way to please others because of our fear of rejection or our fear of judgment. Anxiety is a part of this as well. If this is a constant thing, understand this may be an overlooked sign of your anxiety that is showing up in other ways too. Of course, constantly feeling drained, you forget how to swallow. That's one thing that I hear a lot. I'll just be sitting there and holding stuff in my mouth and I didn't even realize I was doing it. Again, our thoughts are being distracted away from the task at hand. Anxiety may be a thing for you. Even having this sudden need to take a deep breath in, not realizing that you had been holding your breath. This is something that happens quite often where we're holding our breath. We don't even realize it. Then all of a sudden our body says, hey, by the way, it's time to breathe. And the only way to reset the nervous system is to take that really full, deep breath. This is a bit of a hidden sign of anxiety. Of course, there are things like overspending, because impulsivity goes hand in hand with anxiety. You might be having a hard time, and as a result, you begin to buy in hopes that the other symptoms will calm down. It doesn't necessarily work that way. We tend to borrow trouble, as you've heard me say. Hoarding is another. It's a behavior where we feel like if there is a just in case that will be taken care of. It's a way of trying to create safety. Remember that anxiety is all about forecasting, trying to put something in place when you don't have all the information. So this can very much be a symptom of anxiety. Impulsivity, like I just said, can really be where we desire to overhaul our entire life without much forethought. If you've listened to this podcast often, you've heard me say, do not burn down your life. And what I'm saying is don't get into a place where you sweep everything. An example of that would be, say, quitting your job, switching careers altogether, moving, abruptly, or switching majors in college because you just don't know what you're doing, or ending a very healthy relationship. It's okay to sit back and make firm decisions. Of course, overwhelm is a symptom of anxiety, and a lot of people tend to think that overwhelm is just because there's a lot going on, and that can very much be the case. But if you realize that you are above the stress level and you're in a place of really big meltdown, it might be that anxiety is the threshold that's keeping you in that place. Being disorganized is a state of anxiety because your brain struggles to make that long-term plan and organization part of yourself in motion. So if you have a hard time keeping yourself together and you're organized, know that anxiety is definitely something at play. So these are some common symptoms of anxiety. Not all of them, certainly not a diagnosis, but I want you to realize that there are many faces of anxiety. Now, please remember, only a trained medical professional or a mental health professional can actually diagnose anxiety or any other condition for that matter. It's our job to help you explore your symptoms, to identify them, to look for those potential triggers and begin to help you making steps to get better, to feel better, right? To create better habits in your life. There are so many different ways to treat anxiety, from therapy, like what I do with cognitive behavioral therapy and even acceptance and commitment therapy, to trauma therapy, to all kinds of things. If your anxiety is super high level and nothing seems to be working, medication, of course, is a way. There's alternative treatments like what we talk about here on the podcast, everything from meditation to yoga to supplements, breath work. Even acupuncture has really made some big changes for a lot of people. Lifestyle changes, more exercise, more sleep, less caffeine, better diet. A plant-based diet has most certainly been shown to help be a major treatment for anxiety. So we have to look at what's most effective for you. It's going to look different for every single person, just like, as you said in the very beginning of your question, Marianne, how you are showing up and feeling looks different than your friends. But it always helps to identify what's going on, have a goal, and then put the right system in place. If you are experiencing anxiety, please remember it is common. It is very common. And please remember that untreated anxiety can eventually begin to affect and impact your regular routines, your relationships, and just add that daily distress that you don't have to have. Your symptoms may not entirely align with the classic, air quotes, right, sign of anxiety, but anxiety doesn't look the same for every person. So great question. I hope this helps. If you are experiencing anxiety, you guys, decrease the stigma and get the help that you deserve and do the things that are going to make you feel better. Thank you so much for listening to the Get Your Life Together Girl mini mindset reset. If you have a subject or a strategy request, email us at getyourlifetogethergirl@gmail.com. Or you can visit our website at getyourlifetogethergirl.com. If you're looking for daily inspiration or tips and tools, join the growing community at Get Your Life Together Girl on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Thank you for being a valuable member of this community. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others.